on site. Hope you have enjoyed your lunch and be ready for the afternoon sessions that we have. And welcome back everybody who is joining us online.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining this session. I met Murphy this afternoon. Apparently there was an outage here with Telenet, which is the telecom provider in Belgium, but thanks to 4G, we are live right now. And I want to talk about S&OP and how to maximize the value of S&OP in a VUCA world. And I want to start a little bit different in the sense that, in our opinion, if you want to do S&OP, the best thing to do is not talk about S&OP. Only yesterday I had a meeting with somebody who said, yeah, sales tells me that they are making the forecast for supply chain. And I say, no, they are not doing that for supply chain. They are basically doing that for the company. And a concept that we use to connect S&OP to the business is the supply chain triangle, which is shown here on this slide. Triangle explained in my first book, Triangle of Service, Cost and Cash. Costs are all kind of operational costs, purchasing, manufacturing, logistic. Cash is working capital. Working capital is inventory, payables, and receivables. Out of the three, inventory is certainly the most difficult one. And service is more than the on-time and full delivery performance. Service is also how narrow or broad is the product portfolio. What is my order flexibility? Maybe I'm doing VMI or consignment for some key customers. All of these are aspects of the service side of the triangle. And what I've seen over the last 20 years is that salespeople in most companies are primarily service oriented. So they are primarily putting the service side of the triangle. Operations is primarily efficiency and cost focused. So they are primarily putting the cost side of the triangle. And in some companies, it's like the eternal debate between sales and operations, putting two sides of a rope. If in that type of situation, I also see that the inventory is making huge swings as a result, until finance steps in and says, hey, boys and girls, we need to play this game, but we need to play it with less inventory, and we need to play it with a constantly lower inventory. And it's when you bring inventory or cash into the equation that you basically close the triangle and that you start creating pressure. And yeah, there's a lot of discussions on supply chain is about end-to-end processes, but for me, supply chain is really about creating balance, and more specifically about creating balance in this triangle, and that's what that supply chain triangle tries to capture. And okay, if we already felt pressure in the triangle, let's then see what happened over the last year. So we were affected by COVID. There was a problem in the Suez Canal. We have a shortage of semiconductor chips. So if we were already under pressure in the triangle, I think the events of the last year have basically increased the pressure. And if we were talking about VUCA worlds for a couple of years, I think VUCA has really demonstrated itself over the last year. And if that creates that pressure in the triangle, it is important to balance that triangle. And the reason is the following. If you look at the triangle from an investor's perspective, I say, okay, well, service basically is a driver for the sales revenue, for the top line. But as an investor, I'm concerned with more than the top line or growth. I also want to see a margin. If you combine the top line and the cost, you get to the bottom line margin. For instance, EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes. And as an investor, I'm concerned with even more than margin. And why is that? It's simple. If I have two companies who generate 50 million of margin, so 50 million of EBIT, the first company requires 50 million of capital. The second company requires 100 million of capital. Then, of course, I'd rather do the first investment twice. as an investor, I'm really concerned with what's the margin you generate over the capital employed. That is, in financial terms, the return on capital employed, ROCE, or the Americans call that the bang for the buck. If I give you $1, if I invest $1, what do you give me as a margin in return? And people could say, yeah, Bram, this is interesting, but this sounds a bit theoretical. And it's not that theoretical. Remember that I said in the beginning, if you want to engage sales or finance or the CEO into S&OP, the best thing is not to talk about S&OP. And what I want to show you is, okay, we have developed a certain approach, a 7-step approach on how to do S&OP and how to drive value through S&OP. And I will then come back on how we use that concept of the triangle basically as part of that 7-step approach. So these are the 7 steps. I think I wrote that, or I created that early last year. And those 7 steps really compile our experience over the last 15 to 20 years of implementing S&OP. And we still have a lot of companies who come to us and say, okay, we want to do S&OP. We need an S&OP tool. Yeah, so people come to us for S&OP tooling. There's two sides of that. On the one hand, the good side is, if you want to do decent S&OP, you need a decent tool. So I would say, mark my words or read my lips, you cannot do S&OP with Excel, or you cannot do decent S&OP with Excel. If in Excel you still manage to create a volume-based plan, then people will ask you to create a value-based plan. If you still manage to create a value-based plan, they will ask you to run scenarios, and sooner or later the Excel will break. So if you want to do decent S&OP, you really need decent S&OP tooling. The downside of that statement is that, yeah, S&OP is hard. One of the other streams is Laura Ceciri, and Laura Ceciri says, yeah, why is S&OP so hard? Well, the problem is never in the tooling. The problem is in the people, and the problem is in the data. So if you think about people, you could say it's about processes, which maybe we don't have today, master planning, rough cut planning, demand planning. It's about organization. Yeah, maybe we don't have a demand planner role today. It's about capabilities. Maybe our current planning is very operational or very short term. If we want to go to more advanced types of planning and also look at a longer horizon, maybe that's a different set of capabilities, and maybe I even need different planners. And it's about the change. How do I engage the broader organization into that change process? So before you can start implementing the tool, there's certainly a lot of things that need to come up front. And it's also not when you go live with a tool that it's finished. We don't do projects with our customers. We start journeys, and I will come back to some examples on what comes after the go live. What are some of the aspects you need to look into at that point in time? But if you want to know more, in any case, when you see this type of QR code, if you just scan the QR code, it will be you will get a link to a vision paper. And as a spoiler already, people who will be downloading vision papers, we will, by a lucky hand, draw somebody who will receive a copy of my newest book, which I will show later on. But linking those 7 steps back to the triangle. So how do we use the triangle as an example? We start with the awareness phase. So if you want to do S&OP, don't start with talking about S&OP. We start with talking about the triangle. Yeah, what are our issues in the triangle? What is actually the problem that we are trying to solve? Yeah? This is how we did it pre-Corona time, brown papers and Post-its. Yeah, during Corona, we just asked people to take a piece of paper, draw a triangle, and write down what are the issues that you see. So one of the examples here is an American company. What did they do last year? Well, when COVID started, They have been laying off a lot of people, which is easy in the US. They have been building off inventories. Why do you do that? Yeah, to save on cash and to keep the company afloat. What they did not expect is that only 1 month later, demand rebounded, and the demand basically rebounded to levels which were higher than pre-corona. So this company is a supplier to the construction industry, and because everybody was working from home, everybody started renovating, so they saw a huge boom in their demand. They didn't have the people to produce. They had depleted their inventories. So they had huge shortages, and they had those problems for more than 6 months. Yeah? And this is how we start. And then we say to sales, okay, we can help you to solve this, yeah, through S&OP. Yeah, but then you will need to help us to create demand planning and so on. Yeah. A second thing we do, it's not shown here, is talk about strategy. So we say, how do you want to differentiate in the market? This company said, we want to be a total solution player. What does that mean, total solution? A relatively broad product portfolio combined with a lot of added value services and technical pre-sales type of services, where we compile those different products into a total solution for a customer. Again, if this is how we want to differentiate, and we still want to do it, at a reasonable inventory level and at a reasonable cost level, then again we will need your help, to set up decent planning processes. But if you get in from the business side, in my experience, that's really the way to get salespeople, finance people engaged in this. Yeah. This is really about creating awareness, because people don't necessarily know S&OP, but again, don't start with S&OP. Start with what are the business challenges ahead, what is our strategy, and how will S&OP as a process help to tackle those challenges and to support our strategic positioning. If you start creating then a vision on, okay, what do we already have? What are the building blocks that we need? Quite quickly, you run into costs. S&OP does not come for free. But here again, you can use that triangle to create business cases. We look at service improvements and how service improvements can lead to top line improvements. We look at cost improvements. We look at cash improvements like inventory reductions. Maybe through RCCP, rough cut capacity planning, we can better utilize our existing assets. And we do have templates to capture all of that. Again, if you want to know more, each time you see a QR code, if you just scan it, you will be linked to a blog which explains in more detail. And it's not just about creating awareness or then creating a vision and creating a business case. Yeah, we also use the triangle later on, after the go live. After the go live, it's important that you measure and that you improve. In one of our most recent projects, I made sure that part of our compensation is linked to the value generation. So we have certain KPIs, we have certain targets for those KPIs, and if these targets are met, we will get paid more or less. And the reason I did that is the following. I said, okay, if I want to make sure that we use S&OP to generate value, the best way to do it is to link our compensation to that value generation. Because if I link my compensation to it, both the customer and us, Solventure, we are obliged to define how we are going to drive value, how we are going to measure it, what are certain targets. And then I said, please put those same targets in the targets of your project team, because if both teams, our team and your team, have the same objectives to generate value, well, at least I'm sure we are going to measure it and follow it up. And even if we don't immediately see the improvements, I think both teams will do everything which is possible to come to the anticipated benefits. So I see too many business cases which are made up somewhere in the beginning, but are never revisited or looked after at a later stage. That's not what we stand for. We really believe that, for instance, after the implementation, defining how you will drive and measure value is important. This is something we've been using quite often, like an iPad dashboard. This comes out of the specific project where you see, okay, the targets and the KPIs that are defined for the S&OP are service related, cost related, working capital and assets related, translating into a P&L target. We also follow or track sustainability metrics, but that's, for instance, what we should be doing here. Again, if you want to know more, if you just scan the QR code, you will be able to get to a blog. Could current ERP systems be used for the implementation of S&OP? I would say good question. In general, ERP systems have been conceived as transactional systems. And transaction means, okay, once there is a customer order or once there is a production order, they are quite good at following it up. Natively, ERP systems have never been good at planning for the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months. And if you want some flexibility, I would say like 10 years ago, it was almost religious in the sense that you had to do it with the ERP system, even if you didn't want to. Nowadays, I would also say IT mindsets are much more open. So there is much more willingness to work with what we call best of breed systems to do S&OP or advanced planning. If you have questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the chat box. So, okay, if this is talking a bit about how we do S&OP, let's dive into our S&OP vision. And why do we do S&OP? This is something I took from LinkedIn. So Martin Hendel, who was reading my latest book, said, yeah, it's very clear that how S&OP or IBP impact value generation and impact the triangle, because demand planning, portfolio management, and marketing and sales are more like driving that service corner. Master planning, detailed scheduling, MRP, inventory deployment are like more on the cost side. Then we have inventory planning, vendor managed inventory, maybe network planning. Here you could also add rough cut capacity planning. Rough cut capacity is about managing capacities in the most optimal way. That's clearly linked to working capital, inventory, fixed assets, so the capital employed corner. So S&OP is really connecting the different dots or the different pieces, and that's probably also where supply chain needs to play a key role, really in balancing that triangle. So I think it's an excellent illustration why we do S&OP. We do S&OP to connect the different pieces and to drive value. And we have described in quite some detail our vision on S&OP. We'll not explain all of that in detail. We'll just pick a couple of topics. Start with segmentation. I still see in a lot of companies that we use the same service level for all customers and all products. And simply making that statement, we understand this cannot be the correct solution. No two customers are equal. They don't have the same size. They don't have the same margin. They don't have the same willingness to innovate. And no two products are equal. Some products more reflect the past. Others are more strategic and more reflect the future. Some are very easy for me to make. Some are a real nightmare for me to make. And thinking through how to segment customers and products is key in driving the S&OP. Certainly, if we have shortages, if we are short on capacity or we have a shortage of raw material, the segmentation needs to help me to prioritize. But also, for instance, to create focus for the demand planning. I often say that once we know who are the A customers, we should stop guessing what these customers will buy from us. If these are really A customers, I should set up a collaborative forecasting process with the customer. Then I have the B customers, which are still important from a volume or a value perspective, but there are probably too many to individually reach out to each of the customers. So maybe for the B customers, I still want to ask salespeople to validate forecasts, but I will not reach out to the individual customer. And any company has a long tail of C customers. For the C customers, most probably, I don't want to waste salespeople's time in managing those. And if I need to take a service hit somewhere, it's probably in that long tail of C customers. That's how segmentation, as an example, can affect demand planning. Segmentation of products can affect inventory planning. Maybe I can link my product segmentation to make to stock, make to order, or I can link my product segmentation to differentiated service levels. The last thing I want is to have a lot of inventory for less strategic product, which is a pain in the neck for me to produce. If it's not strategic, that's not where I want to invest my inventory. And as I said, if I have a constraint of capacity or a constraint of raw materials, most probably I want to be able to prioritize different customer streams in my supply planning. To come back to the example I just gave, the American company, there they said, okay, I want to be able in my capacity planning to differentiate between A customers and the rest. And for the A customers, I want to reduce my lead times and my backlog to 2 weeks. And okay, the impact will be that for other customers, it will be a bit longer, but it's part of my strategy, yeah, to deliver, let's say, a total solution. And okay, once I'm short, I want to be able to prioritize certain customer segments in my delivery promise. Again, if you want to know more, you can just scan the QR code and you will be directed to a vision paper on that segmentation. Second thing I wanted to briefly touch upon is product management. On the one hand, I often say that if companies launch a new product, that in 7 out of 10 cases, the product is overstated or the forecast is too high. And if you don't watch out, when we launch the new product, yeah, we already have produced for 6 or 9 months of inventory. On the other hand, it also means that for 3 out of 10, the forecast could be understated. And of course, we don't want to be short of product for a new product. And okay, it's important to address that as a separate step in the S&OP process and to keep the pulse. There's no magic solution, but if I know there is a lot of uncertainties on NPIs, having a separate process step where at least every month I look at what is the latest status and what are the latest estimates, and maybe how I can reduce the demand uncertainty by doing trials, by trying to capturing some demand sensing type of information. These are all things that need to be done. Product management is also about end of life. And there I say that many companies are good at introducing new products, but very bad at taking old products out. And if I don't take old products out, yeah, my portfolio will keep on growing. And it's a bit like cholesterol. Yeah? So a little bit of cholesterol is good, but if you have too much cholesterol in the system here, in the S&OP system, you will simply get a stroke or a heart attack. So certainly if you have complex portfolios or if you do a lot of innovation, keeping track of the complexity of the product portfolio is key. And here again, that triangle can really help in the sense that what happens near the end of a life cycle? Typically, the sales starts declining. I get price competition, so there is also margin erosion. So the sales is declining, and most probably the margins are declining even faster. If I still want to keep a high service level, I will need to invest more inventory in the relative terms. So from a bang for the buck perspective, I get less margin. I need to invest more inventory. I need to invest more bucks. But that's not what I want. So using that concept of the triangle to, for instance, look at what's the margin over inventory and have a different type of discussion with marketing or with product management or with R&D, that's really required to keep the product portfolio healthy. Again, if you want to know more, there's another vision paper that you can download. And linking back to the VUCA situation, yeah, if you have difficulties to deliver today, well, for sure, you don't want to have bad products cannibalizing on raw materials or cannibalizing on capacity. So no, if you are under pressure, it's important to stay healthy and to stay fit. So then cleaning up the product portfolio is also certainly something you should consider. And then the last thing I want to briefly show, and it might be a little bit hard to read, is it's on the forecasting piece, where this is a development which we've been doing over the last 2 to 3 years, and it's based on PhD research, where we say, okay, if I look at a lot of historical data patterns, it looked like the one here on the bottom left. So our sales was quite good, of course, with a lot of ups and downs, and then COVID started. Yeah? And COVID negatively impacted our sales. And what will a traditional forecasting technique do? That's shown here on the bottom right. Well, if I'm in this downward trend, and if I use simple extrapolation methods, they will just extrapolate that all the way down. So if I want to increase the intelligence of my forecasts, I need to link it to external data. And we've built a tool where we connect different sources. In the meantime, there's more than 10 million indicators. And basically, the tool gives you access to these indicators, and we can also help you to identify the relevant indicators for you and for your business. We are currently working with Solvay. Solvay is a big chemical company, and of course, different segments have different indicators. So if I'm looking at automotive, or if I'm looking at construction, or if I'm looking at pharmaceutical, different sectors are moving at different speeds across the globe. And finding what are the relevant leading indicators, that's really something what this tool is meant to bring. Yeah? And it's a way to, let's say, increase the intelligence of your demand planning solution. And yeah, this is more or less where I want to stop and see if there's a couple of questions still left. So use the QR codes to download our content, and you can win a copy of my new book, which is here on the right, The Strategy-Driven Supply Chain. And let me see if there's one or two questions I can still pick here. If not, I'm happy to join you in our virtual booth, the Solventure booth, and you can also connect and continue the discussion via LinkedIn, which you can also get here through that QR code. So let me see if there's one or two questions I can still answer for you. You can drop your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box. If there's no questions, I will close the session and jump into our virtual booth. So looking forward to connect with you, and don't hesitate to reach out. I hope you enjoyed, and this was meant to be a bit like an overview, so I really hope that you will enjoy some of the extra content to which we provided links. Okay. Thank you for joining the sessions, and enjoy the rest of this day.